Hi everyone, welcome to the introduction to Lincoln Douglas debate. I'm so happy you're here, and let's get started. Okay, so what is Lincoln Douglas debate? So it's a 40-minute competitive debate round, and it's inspired by Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas debates. So this is a solo event, which means that it's you versus one competitor. And then that means that there's going to be one judge and two opponents in the room. And each opponent has a side, so it's either affirmative or negative. You usually find this out about 30 minutes before the round. Usually for middle school tournaments, there will be 3 preliminary rounds, which means that you're going to debate 2 times on one of the sides and 1 time on the other. And then depending on how you do in the preliminary rounds, you'll make it into the preliminary rounds, which is what we call breaking. So how is LD special? So LD is special because it's a value debate. This means that there's essentially the impact of the argument is dependent on the lens that the judge is using. So this is your value or framework. You decide the lens. So you state in your case, like one of the very first things you say is my value is this, my value criterion is this. And we're going to go into what value and value criterion means later, in a different lecture. But essentially you choose this and you debate with your opponent on which the judge should choose and why your case fits whatever value ends up being the value for the round better. So it's also special because it's a relatively short debate round. It's only 40 minutes. I like it because it's even if you're doing bad, it's only 40 minutes of your life. You're going to learn, you're going to do better next time. And then it's also special because you're debating the pros and the cons of the resolution. So usually affirmative is pros and negative is cons. And then the competitor also debates both sides in a tournament. So this is like I was saying, usually in preliminary rounds, you debate 2 times with one side and 1 time with the other because there are 3. So the first thing that we're going to do is define a few key terms and how they're used in a round. So the first is resolution. The resolution is the statement that you are debating. So you either affirm the statement, or you agree with the statement, or you negate the statement, or you disagree with the statement. It also always has resolved in the beginning of the phrase. It's written formally, so you just copy and paste whatever NSCA puts out. For LD, it changes every 2 months. And so an example of a resolution is resolved, states ought to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. So affirming or negating the resolution. The affirmative is agreeing with the resolution. In round, affirmative is often shortened to AF. They have the first and the last speech, and in total there are 3 affirmative speeches. The negative is obviously disagreeing with the resolution, and it's usually shortened to neg, and the negative also only has 2 speeches in between the affirmative speeches. So cross-examination, which is usually shortened to CX. This is where you ask your opponent either clarifying questions about a case or a rebuttal, or you ask them trap questions. You want to be asking them trap questions, but sometimes they don't always come, and that's okay. And a trap question is basically just trying to get them to either admit your case is better or their case is bad, admit there's a hole in their case, admit that your case essentially does something that theirs doesn't, which means that you win the round. So prep time. Both debaters have 4 minutes of prep time to prepare for certain speeches. These 4 minutes can be used anywhere between speeches in the round, so you decide how much time you want to use. For example, the negative after the first CX and before the NR could be hey, I'm going to use 2 minutes of prep time starting now, and then time themselves. Or you could say, I'm going to use running prep time, which means that essentially the stopwatch just goes until you're I'm done, which you say out loud. So time can be split between speeches. So for example, 2 minutes before the first affirmative rebuttal and 2 minutes before the second affirmative rebuttal. So again, you basically decide when you want to use the prep time. I would recommend always doing 2 and 2. Don't use all 4 at once. You honestly don't really need it. So the second section is the structure of the round. How does the debate actually work? So this is a quick cheat sheet for the structure of the round. There's also another cheat sheet on the website under speech times. But this is essentially what you're doing for each speech, how long each speech is, and essentially what each speech does in the round. And then again, this is just the speech time. So it goes 6-3, 7-3, 4, 6-3. You should memorize that. It's very, very helpful. What I used to do is when I was flowing or taking notes, I would write the speech times next to the speech names, because essentially you're flowing in columns, and this would help me stay on track. And because it's kind of hard to keep saying 6-3, 7-3, 4-6, 3 in a round. So 3, deciding the winner is how the judge decides and how you can try to win. So for first, the judge will submit a ballot to the tournament saying if they voted for the affirmative or negative. This alone decides who wins or loses, which means it's completely up to judge discretion unless there's like obvious discrimination, but probably low chances. If you feel that there's discrimination, you should talk to your coach. But essentially what this is trying to say is that there's no rubric for winning, right? It's completely up to the judge. So you can do the best round you've ever done, but if the judge doesn't like your case, then you're not winning the round, right? And this can be good and bad in both cases, which means that like either way, you just have to debate your best every time. And then the second way, this doesn't really decide the winner, but it's another evaluation, is your speaker points. So this is out of 30, and it's how you spoke in the round. So like it says, like the number of points does not correlate with whether you win or lose. 30 is the highest, 0 is the lowest, but usually tournaments will range from like about 26 to 30, 26 meaning that you did pretty bad, and you need a lot of work. 25 is usually like you were racist or sexist or something. 28 is about average. And this does vary, especially with parent judges, because some of them just don't really know the like expected range. So do take it with a grain of salt. And then part 2 to deciding the winner is the RFD. So this is the reason for decision. The judge will usually write comments on the ballot about how the round went, which includes advice, criticism, and praise. It explains why the judge voted for a certain debater. So on Tabroom, you will have 2 sections. The first is the RFD. This goes to both debaters, and it's essentially just being the judge being like, oh, I voted for the affirmative because of this, this, and this argument. The second session will be personal comments, and it's essentially the judge giving you that advice, criticism, or praise. 4, in a round. So walking you through the average LD debate round. So before the debate, the first thing you want to do is make a good impression. So you're going to want to greet the judge and the opponent by introducing yourself and what your position is. So for example, hi, my name is John V, and I will be debating the affirmative today. It's polite to shake hands and casually talk with opponent and judge before the round begins, but you don't have to. And the judge will say when the round begins. Okay, so going through the first few speeches, the 1AC, the affirmative, will give their first speech and present their case. Then there will be CX, so the negative will ask the affirmative questions. Prep time, the neg will take approximately 2 minutes of prep time. Again, prep is up to your discretion, but most people will take it here. Next is the 1 in CR, so the neg will present their case and rebuttal to the affirmative. And then CX again, so this time the affirmative is asking the negative questions about their 1 in C speech. It's good practice to just ask about the 1 in C. You don't really ask about the rebuttal here just because the negative doesn't get to ask about rebuttals. You can, but it's just not really like common to do, and it's not a very nice thing to do either. And then going on to the pure rebuttals is the 1AR, so the affirmative is going to present their rebuttal to the negative case and also defend the affirmative case. You should always be defending your case before responding to theirs, because that is your offense, and that's why you should win the round. Next is the 2 and R, so again, you defend the neg case first and then present rebuttal to the affirmative case. This is the final neg speech, so you also want to give voters at the end, essentially just clear reasons why you win the round. And then 2AR is basically the same thing. The affirmative presents rebuttal and defends the AF case. Again, defend your case first. Again, this is the final speech, so you give voters why you win the round, why your framework best fits, why your case best fits your framework, all of that. So after the round ends, the judge will write the RFD in the ballot on Tabroom and decide the winner. Most likely, the judge will not disclose who won the round. You don't really want to ask just because you don't want to seem pushy. And then at the end of the debate, say goodbye to the judge and opponent and thank them for a good round. Shake their hand and wish them a good day. Thank you. You guys can't really ask me any questions, but feel free to reach out if you have any. Thank you.